Welcome to Talkin Maine with a Bowtie Boy. I'm Tom Saviello, and I brought my lawyer and my judge with me today. Your Honor, Don Alexander, it is my honor and pleasure to have you on my show, sir.
Tom, I'm delighted to be here. As I was always delighted to interact with you when you were in the Senate.
We had a good time together.
We had a
Sometimes
great time together.
And I have the second brother, not the first brother.
Right.
Right. Mills. Paul, thanks for bringing Don in and introducing me to the book. Just so everybody knows, let me steal this for a minute. We're going to talk a little bit about the book and some of Don's experiences as a judge, most recently as the on the law court, Maine Supreme Court, where he harassed me all the time.
Oh, I don't know about that.
We had a good time, though.
I called you out at Mount Blue High School when we were there.
That's right.
No person in Maine history has served as long as an active justice or judge as Donald Alexander, 41 years.
41 years.
41 years and 1 month, yeah.
41 years, wow. And who appointed you?
Governor Jim Longley.
But you were saying as we started that everybody thought perhaps Joe Brennan appointed you. Because
That's right. Well, what happened was I was working for Joe Brennan. I was his Deputy Attorney General. We got along very well. I anticipated I was going to be, going to the governor's office after the election. The election night, I was locking up the AG's office. Governor Longley came over and said hello and invited me to come over and watch the election results at the Blaine House with him. I says, I'm sorry, Governor, I can't because I've got to go to the Secretary of State's office. I was the election attorney also, and we always had two attorneys go over to the Secretary of State's office and stay there because all kinds of things came up.
Wow.
We had, at that point, had printed ballots, and there was no way to, Xerox them then. And so, we'd have state troopers have to go to people ran out of ballots. We had questions come up about what happens if there's a line of voters at 8 o'clock, things like that. So we had all kinds of questions come in from local election officials, and we had to respond to them. And so I worked in the Secretary of State's office till an hour after the election. Myself and another attorney in 1978, it was Steve Wright. So I was heading over there. I couldn't go with Governor Longley. I would have liked to. And he says, he says, Don, I got something I got to tell you. And he says, what's that? And he says, I have one more judicial appointment. You're at the top of the list.
Really?
I says, oops, going to be a career change from what I'd anticipated here.
So this is on election night, he tells you that.
This is on election night, yeah. And then he nominated me a week or two later.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you started so tell me how you got the idea of writing the book, and then we want to talk about some of the local stuff that went on with the court system.
Okay. In 2019, we knew that the 200th anniversary of the state of Maine separated from Massachusetts and the creation of the Maine Supreme Judicial Court and the Maine court system was coming up. We had some discussions that involved Paul Mills. It involved Derek Langhauser with the governor's office, Chief Justice Softly, some other people, and decided let's try to plan to have a ceremony at about the time of the 200th anniversary of the creation of the court, anticipated for July 1, thereabouts in 2020. And I will put together some historical stuff. And so I began organizing a lot of historical stuff. Some of the things in here that are, attachments or references were I was going to put together something shorter than the book, but with a whole lot of attachments. For example, the 100th anniversary statement of Chief Justice Cornish, the 150th anniversary statement of Vincent McCusick, which was done in 1968, 2 years before the 150th, things like that. Some excellent work that Herb Silsby had done was going to be organized. And so, his history of the trial courts, which he had done, things like that. And we're going to then present those to other people who would then make presentations. I anticipated was, be around, though I was anticipating, and they knew I was anticipating retiring before then. And so Paul was one of the people who drove it, and then we started, and I would then, as I organized it, would contact Chief Justice Softly and Derek Langhauser and Paul to see how's it going. And then, of course, COVID came, there wasn't going to be any ceremony, and at that point, with, again, Chief Justice Softly, though she became Dean of the Law School, and Derek Langhauser and Paul, we decided to switch it to a book that was much more detail in the book with less attachments. And remember, the book has a history, and then it has a personal listing of the court, of the justices who have served on the Supreme Judicial Court, the Superior Court, and the District Court. And it has a sort of one-year takeout listing of the judges who were on the municipal court, including here in Farmington, for 1961, which was the last year of the full municipal court before the law began to phase it out.
Wow. And Paul, how did this all fit into the local stuff? Because I think that's important. I got a whole bunch of other questions to go through with the judge.
Sure.
I think.
Well, in Franklin County, as in many other parts of the state, we had until the 1960s, at least at the most of the trial court situations where people would more frequently encounter a judge, municipal courts and trial justice courts, part-time judges. We still have that in the probate arena, but generally speaking, it was much more pervasive then. And so there were the so-called trial justice courts, which the most recognizable one in Franklin County was run by Coney Hoyt in Phillips. He was a banker and a businessman. He actually was not a lawyer. And one did not need, and this is still true in many other parts of the country, one did not need to be a lawyer to be a trial justice. You need to be a lawyer, essentially be a municipal court judge. Actually, you don't need to be a lawyer, ironically, to be a member of the U.S. Supreme Court, but I don't think there's ever been in modern times anyone that has not been. But in any event, what's going on is you had a well-known local figure by the name of Benny Butler, actually a local historian as well, was our last municipal court judge. And he was one of the last municipal court judges in the state of Maine because his term extended into the fall of 1965. And then we had a lot of other, many of the local attorneys that were well-known people in the community in the area for a long time, at one time or another kind of took their turn being the municipal court judges. The late Gerard Williams, Jerry's dad, Currier Holman, for example, my father, my grandfather, Hubert Ryan from Wilton, was a municipal court judge, but the only one that wasn't a municipal court judge, maybe Calvin was not one. It wasn't one that really endured for a great many time. But some of our more prominent judges throughout the state actually at one time had been municipal court judges.
So what were the municipal court judges' responsibilities? So if I get a speeding ticket, did I go to them?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was, and because speeding was criminal then, you had a speeding ticket, you go to them, forcible entry and detainer, what was the equivalent of small claims. There were, and it varied from court to court. Some had a limit if you were making a claim of a jurisdiction of $300. Some had a limit of $500. Some might have had $700 as what you were making your claim. It was and because all the first appearances from arrests, where there wasn't a grand jury indictment before, were in the municipal courts. And you could go before a local attorney judge. They would meet once or twice a week, or in some of the smaller communities, maybe twice a month for a particular day where they would do all the first appearances. Obviously, most people not in custody, and the collection cases, things like that. That's what they did. And you could have some non-judges in the municipal courts, because the clerks of the municipal courts, which are called recorders, if the judge wasn't available, the recorder could
be the judge?
Could be the judge, and that happened sometimes. So even in municipal courts, you sometimes would get someone who was not a judge.
Wow. And Paul, you were saying earlier too about the gentleman in Phillips. What did he do?
Well, we had a lawyer in Phillips by the name of Prince Sawyer. Sawyer Street in Phillips is a name for him. And during the count-out of 1879, which was a situation similar to some of the controversies attending the end of the 2020 election in this country, when there was a certification battle for members of the legislature and who had the right credentials and who was going to be elected or not. And it went into actually quite a crucial situation of whether the Democrat or the Republican or who was going to be governor of the state, because they needed a runoff. But anyway, Prince Sawyer was the Democrat, and he was the Deputy Secretary of State. And there was such tension that among some of the near violent disorderly actions that happened was Prince Sawyer had custody of the state seal and he threw it into the Kennebec River. And that was in the count out of 1879, 1880, when the legislature was called upon to break a deadlock, really, because there wasn't a majority vote and three people running for governor.
And of course, what happened was it was the old legislature, and they were therefore canceling votes, canceling ballots from the municipal reports of the new thing, which would have, changed the party. The ones who were in control were the Democrats. It would have changed and did change to the Republicans after the Maine Supreme Court rulings. Plus, General or President Chamberlain's intervention.
He came down and put the cannon in the Hall of Flags, pointing out the fields. It basically said, if I have to, because they brought him down to bring peace.
But that was in the middle. I mean, there was still the Maine Supreme Court issued 4 opinions within a month. Then it was really amazing. That and they would be asked for the opinion and would issue it like 3 days later, and it was detailed opinions. You look at the history. It's all put together in some stuff that's I acquired out of the state law library, and the total length of the opinions, and they're all unanimous, with the exception of one judge who didn't sit because he'd done some trial single justice work in them. The total number of the total pages of the opinions is about 100 on those opinions. And they were thorough opinions issued within, 3 to 5 days of the question being asked.
And they were solemn occasions. Basically, they were asking the
court. Yes, like solemn occasions.
So they had almost as much capacity and almost much stamina and endurance and passion for writing as you do, because nobody's been more prolific about legal writing, whether it's on the law court in the 4 books you've been doing, than you are. And so if it had been back and you had been in the Maine Supreme Court that time, there probably would have been 300 pages and not 100 pages.
No, because the more serious the subject, the more focused you want to have the opinion, and that's
okay.
I mean,
so go back to 1879, 1880. The election takes place, and if I remember from the numbers in the book, the Republican got like 46% of the vote. Somebody else got 30, and then the Democrat got 20.
The third party candidate, Smith, it was a Green Party candidate, came in second. And there was sort of a rough coalition between the Greenback and the Democrat, who was a physician from Lewiston, who was actually the incumbent, Alonzo Garcelon. And some interpretations, he might be considered the first Franco-American governor of Maine, although he never did win the popular vote. When he was elected the first time, he was a minority candidate. But in any event, and it was the executive council, the outgoing executive council was controlled by the Republicans.
Democrats.
Well, that's right, controlled by the Democrats that were sort of issuing certifications that were considered to be, you might say, spurious. Similar to situations
they were discarding votes. There was not. And there was substantial state election reform shortly after that, because at the time, the municipalities prepared their own ballots.
Oh, that's right. I remember reading that, yes.
Sometimes the candidates were referred to as, let's say, J.D. Smith or T. Saviello. And for those municipalities that had done that, if there was a Democratic, a Republican had gotten elected, they would exclude, the executive council with the governor would exclude those votes.
So they call it the count-out. Because they did act, as many of the people in the situation involving Trump, they had some type of facial sort of reasoning involved because, well, your name is Thomas Saviello, but because they printed the ballot at the local level as T. Saviello, we can't count that. And so that was kind of the reasoning involved. They had the hook on something, and that's what they did. But they didn't. The Maine Supreme Court didn't buy it, and the Republicans. You had 2 bodies meeting purporting to be the duly constituted legislature of the state of Maine simultaneously. So it was really almost, it was more of a banana republic situation we saw January 6th, except without the violence.
Wow. Well, it could have been the violence.
And it could have been, but Chamberlain stepped in at the point where it could have been. And the thing is, there was a lot of the similarities with that in terms of discounting votes, and also there was the Supreme Court conceded it that they were acting borderline on what they accept as a solemn occasion, because they did take a question from the legislature, from the Democratic legislature, which they had already ruled by then had been, improperly elected. But they said, we'll take the question anyways because resolution of these questions is important. That was the last of the 4 opinions of the justices.
And the solemn occasion, just so the people
Solemn
that are watching,
occasions, yeah.
is that's something where the legislature can ask for an opinion of the justices
Yes.
to get an idea on the constitutionality of the question. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's the final outcome if it was sued, but there's a pretty good indication that they'll go forward.
It's a pretty good indication of it. It has to be something that of real meaning. It can't say, we're thinking about this law, is it constitutional? No, you can't do that. That's not, a real and immediate impact.
Don, let's just move ahead because we're running through the time here a bit into the 21st century or late 20th century and your career on the court. What do you consider to have been the most compelling set of reforms or transformations or changes that have occurred the last 40 or 50 years of your involvement in this? You talk about Justice Dufresne, he doesn't get enough credit, which McCusick came in, whatever.
Yeah, well, I think, we had a dramatic change, which was really over, the terms of 3 Supreme Court Chief Justices, Chief Justice Williamson, Chief Justice Dufresne, Chief Justice McCusick, from a county-based and largely with the municipal courts part-time judicial system with old common law rules to a modern state-level based, state-controlled, state-supervised judicial system that within the time from 1959 through really those all changes were occurred by 1975 under Dufresne, but then they were implemented with a lot of great procedural revisions when McCusick had come in his 2 terms. But it was just a dramatic change. Interestingly, there was a report in 1952 that became the basis for the district court creation, which said, this part-time judge thing really doesn't work because you have people that are judging and then they're lawyering against the same people who are appearing before them. And of course, the 52 report said this was a problem for the municipal courts and for the problem of funding the superior courts, which are totally controlled, except for the judges, by the counties. And remember, the Superior Court had only been created in 1930. Okay. But the judges were appointed by the state, but all the financing, the buildings, the security, the jail was county. They said that's not good. And that included the references to the probate courts. They then had another study after the district court had been created in 1967, which said, hey, we got to go to a state system in the probate courts too, but that's never happened until they're right now again, and there's 4 or 5 studies since, all of which said the same thing. They're now talking about moving something toward that.
Was the municipal judge appointed by the municipality or by the governor? Governor.
Well, but for a short period of time, they were popularly elected.
Oh, right.
From the 1855 to about 1870s, for about 18, 20 years or so, municipal court judges ran for election, just like probate court judges did. And just like the judges in maybe 38 other states in this country have a popular election system of judges. Now, I know it is anathema, and I know it's repugnant to many people who studies that have been done by academics. This isn't good. But you have to think about that sometime, that if the majority of the states are still doing it, there is the potential for corruption. There is the potential for mismanagement. There's some issues. We had a probate judge in York County, had some problems, that kind of thing. But I'm kind of a partisan of the laboratory kind of concept of government and judicial. Let's experiment here, let's experiment there, and we're still continuing with this experiment on a very limited basis in Maine of popular elected judges, and sometimes it's panning out, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the appointed judges don't pan out either, so you never can tell.
That's right, and of course right now the legislature is considering, again, ending the probate courts with a phase-out, but perhaps keeping the county level registers of probate who are skilled at dealing with the people, because you've got to have just a wide range of situations you deal with, some of which are formally judging, some of which aren't, and people in very difficult situations where someone just
There's
died.
a certain accessibility
Yeah.
of keeping it more local.
Yeah.
There's just I go up there every day, and there's always people lined up. Some of them forget their passports, which is really not technically part of the function, but they're performing a public service, and they're sort of an open door policy of people coming in and out for a lot of situations, which I think the fact that the register and the judges are popular elected is make it more hospitable in some situations to that kind of hospitality.
Yeah, and
you know.
I want to emphasize, people always point out the problems. Well, there was this problem, Judge, in York County. Yes, that's true. But there have been, on the probate courts, there have been amazingly few of those problems. Most of the probate judges, at least to the extent I've been watching it over the last decades, have performed competently, sometimes with different styles than some other people would think, but generally have performed competently, ethically, and the work has gotten done. And, at a reasonable cost for, and with good accessibility for the local people that need to access probate.
What are some of the
courts.
other reforms and some of the major changes that you see? Because there's certainly a lot of others besides, making the professionalized district court. Of course, we have a professionalized, in the 70s, a district attorney systems. We used to have part-time prosecutors that people would sort of take their turns and be the county prosecutor, and then it became a full-time position, a career profession. Beginning with the election of 1974. Tom Delahanty was the last popular elected one in Androscoggin County, and he was for a county attorney, and he was the first under the full-time system. And it's one that Janet, my sister, served in for a number of years in the Tri-County area. And Andy Benson, who has just been Andy Robinson, Andy Robinson, who has been just nominated to be district court judge for the last 8 years, has been the district attorney for Androscoggin, Franklin, and Oxford counties.
Yeah.
And so we've seen that from the local standpoint, and that seems to be a transformation that's occurred in the court system too.
The DA is elected, though, still.
That's right. Still elected, but it's a full-time position where they're prohibited from engaging in private practice.
Yeah, and most, or I won't say all, but most of the district attorney's staff, the assistant district attorneys, are full-time and not involved with private practice, which is a sea change from before 1974, when that was the first election. Because the interesting thing too is, on the first election and subsequently that, we had a lot of really bright young people who became district attorneys either with the 1974 election or shortly thereafter.
Joe Jabber, for example.
Joe Jabber, Michael Povich in Ellsworth, Tom Delahanty, who was quite young, and of course, Janet Mills.
Was she?
Later, but she was later on. But yes,
But
that's
no,
right.
but not. I'm talking about people who were and show that with approximately 5 years practice, if you're dedicated and bright, you can do a really good job, because those district attorneys all did a very good job. Roland Cole was not a district attorney; he was a county attorney, but he was again within 4 or 5 years of practice when he became county attorney, and because it was York County, he was virtually full time.
Yeah, Severin Beliveau was a part-time county attorney in Oxford County, fresh out of law school. He'd only been out of law school about a year when he was elected. But you had some older people like Donahue in York County, who was elected when he was like, 74 years old, I think?
In 1974,
Right.
But
He'd been a member of the legislature years before. He had been a part-time county attorney 20 years before, and he kind of came back from nowhere and was elected the first popular elected district attorney in York County, and that precipitated an episode whereby within a few months there was a removal proceeding before Governor Longley, at which Arthur Stilfen, the deputy, to Attorney General Brennan and other people were sort of involved in that, and he was retained in all. Anyway, that became a difficult situation in the transition to the full-time system, because a person had been elected who had at least initially not behaved the way he was supposed to at first, anyway.
Yeah, well, because the AG's office had to step in York County and also over on the coast.
Really?
After the 74 election. And of course, one of the assistant AGs who stepped in, Arthur Brennan, then became district attorney in York County the next time around. Then ultimately, he was then, Governor Brennan then appointed him to the court.
Wow.
To district court.
So Superior Court didn't come into play until the 30s.
That's right. Before then, the law court judges, and there were 8 up from 1850 something to 1930, also sat, and actually most of their work was as a trial judge, going around riding circuits, sitting as a single justice in various counties.
Oh, I got you. I understand. So they were acting as a Superior Court judge.
They effectively acted as a Superior Court, as a Superior Court judge.
And they sometimes still do. I mean,
oh yeah, that's right.
It's not unheard of for it to do, but it's more routine to what they were doing. Was they were right on the front lines, and at the same time, of course, they couldn't rule and at the appellate level on their own decisions.
That's right.
But they had this interaction, and sometimes even today, you have a Maine Supreme Court justice who will come to Farmington and be in the district court. Remember, Chief Justice Wathen was sitting in the district court, again, briefly, to take somebody's place. And I think it was, and you obviously had the experience of doing those kinds of things too.
I regularly sat in both the Superior Court and the district court when I was when I was appointed to the law court. And I sometimes helped out with the district court, particularly down in Washington County when I was on the, and sometimes in Androscoggin County when I was on the Superior Court.
When this goes to the next episode, you need to talk about some of the amazing cases that you presided over when you're in the Superior Court and also at the law court level. I think that's a chapter 2 kind of item, because your own personal career is certainly worth speaking about a little bit more than we have right now.
And we're about to close this out, so Your Honor, I hope you'll stay with me and do another show. And
okay.
Paul, I think you actually have to go to work.
Yeah, that's right. Yes,
Thank
punch
you.
by time clock. Yes.
I'm just sitting here fascinated. I'm learning a lot. Thank you so much.
Glad to do it.
Thanks for coming on the show, and we're going to hold you over and have another show.
We'll talk about various things.
Everything. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.